All right, Elliot, as we wrap up your curriculum, I think we actually talked about wrapping it up several weeks ago, but a lot of the episodes ended up 2-3-parters. And then also I keep getting questions and I keep getting scenarios that are coming across my path that are really reminiscent of what we've been talking about in this series. And of course, as we want to underscore, yes, this is a premarital curriculum for those newlyweds or newlyweds to be. But of course, we as people who have been married ourselves for a decent number of years, we know that these kinds of content areas are a great way to just refresh and to make sure that we are staying on point with our marriage, like we talk about an oil change or a wellness check. And as I think about these couples, I mean, again, it's wedding season upon us, and I think about the couples you're working with and those who maybe aren't working with someone, and I really wish they would, but if they listen to this, it's a great first step for them to start really delving into some of those questions that are a little tougher. I think about the young couple now, let's say the wedding's this summer and they're launched. Let's talk a little bit about how they can present themselves now, because a marriage is a wonderful thing, but we know in our research on stress, it's also very stressful for everyone. It's a huge developmental change for the entire family system, for the family life cycle. And young people, and that includes anyone 20s, 30s, even in their 40s, if they haven't really thought about this stuff, may struggle to kind of step into that role of, we are now a married couple. We are now a united front. We now have to put ourselves first and present ourselves in that way to our family of origin. So just give a little foundation of this topic in general, and then we can get to some specific scenarios that could come up that can make this tricky.
Your introductions are not easy for ADHD.
They're not easy for me because I feel like, stop it, Karen, enough, get to the point.
Because I think about 5 different things that you said already. I'm like, oh, I want to hit that. Oh, I want to hit that. Oh, I want to. And then I'm trying to stay focused there. Anyway, so yes, you are right. Of course, systemically, the change to the entire family tree on both sides is significant every time there's a partnership, really of any kind of commitment that's beyond we're just dating. I saw that at the graduation this weekend when one of my daughter's best friends introduced her committed boyfriend to me. And I could tell by the way she was introducing him that this was at a high level of commitment. And just the functionality of the friendship group has changed because of that. And I know her family, and there was some obvious change there also. Not bad changes. None of it's bad. It's just reality. So just like we talked about in premarital curriculum, going through family systems and expectations, I think it's also about the love language of presentation we talked about. It's one of the bonus ones that I use. Not saying Dr. Chapman's are flawed or void in any way, but I just added this one.
Just a little bonus.
Yeah, that the presentation, how we present ourselves as a couple to our families and to our relatives and to our community and to our church matters. And if those aren't talked through or understood, we often either hurt our feelings within our marriage or within our partnership, or offend somebody else in the family system, or we end up catering to elements of the family system that might not be healthy, strong, or wise.
Well, it's an abrupt and a very definitive transition. And yet we're human beings and we have all these patterns and dynamics. And as, let's say, you're a bride now and you've spent your whole life loving your parents and trying to be obedient or maybe being rebellious, but still your parents were that authority figure in your life. And just because you're 28 years old now and you're now a married woman doesn't mean that it's going to be easy to just go, wait a minute, my husband and I, we have to make that call. I can't look to my parents to guide me in this. Sure, guidance, but to make the final decision in pretty much any realm of your life at this point.
Yeah, the stronger your family system in the positive realm, and the better leaders you have above you in parents or siblings, the harder this transition is.
Yeah.
You think it might be easier that way, but you're very confident and trust your parents or older siblings to make decisions for you at times. Even if you could make them yourself, you're like, oh, he made it or she made it, and that's fine. But once you get married, that can't be the same. That's all part of the leave, cleave, and one flesh part in Genesis we talked about, where the primary decision-making team now has to be a little more succinctly wrapped up in the partnership. Doesn't mean you don't take godly counsel from all sides, but what often happens, and I'm sure I'm guilty of this in my own family with my children, is you just kind of present things so strongly and so positively and so maybe dogmatically with wisdom and experience that you end up taking or disempowering your children to make decisions they need to make on their own. And that's going to be doubly the case when my children have their committed partners as well.
Well, and I think that relates to something that's kind of just one of those things that's out there in the discourse, like the in-laws, it's always so hard to get along. I don't have that, but then I got married later, which of course we keep saying we're going to have that episode because I think Dan and I getting married later, we're more fully formed. And I think this is a little bit more of a struggle for those 20, 30 somethings that are getting married. And then because the in-laws maybe are having a hard time letting go as well. And like you said a moment ago, it might be difficult because, and what I want to say here, it's not that you don't listen to your parents or to your in-laws. That would be foolish. Yep. They have lived more life than you. But you need to establish yourself as a couple and you need to establish yourself as a united front. And what happens, I think, that can be troubling with the in-laws is maybe you have a mother-in-law who's not willing to let go of her son or a father-in-law that's not willing to let go of his daughter. And then the spouse goes, well, wait a minute. Wait, we should be making that decision together, but your dad told you to do this and it's a done deal. But I wasn't even asked about that. And it's about our lives and our decisions. We're the couple. And so making that alliance needs to be altered in order to be healthy. And I don't think that that's easy. And there's really no workbook for that unless you probably should write a book about this is actually what I'm saying right now.
Yeah. And often we don't even know it's happening unless we stop, assess, analyze, and process through it. And we talked about on previous episodes, debriefing from our family trips or our family connections or holidays together, traditions is really wise. Even if it went great, even if everything was wonderful, it's still debriefing just, hey, how did that go for you? What was that like for you? Just we talked about in the Christmas episodes about traditions and what has to happen compared to what can happen. Just we end up having what the author of The Good Daughter Syndrome says, unconscious agreements. We assume we have to agree to these things and just we act as if they are the gold standard demarcation line of all decisions. And we sometimes don't even think to talk to our partner about something. Well, Dad just said this is what's happening, so I just did it. Well, what about my thought involved in that? What about, or Mom just said this, we're doing this. I'm like, well, what if I don't want to do that as the new in-law or the person involved? So it goes a little bit into like a groupthink context or just the power dynamic of each family system. There's usually one primary decision maker, and it's easy for them to stay in that mode, even when there's lots of new relatives or in-laws involved in the family group.
And I think that is where the in-law trouble gets in the way, because maybe, let's say the groom's parents aren't willing to step back a little bit and give that space, like you said. And of course, if a young couple comes to the parents and says, hey, what do you think about this? Absolutely give your advice, but then let it go because it's not your life anymore. You've raised your kids now. You've done your job. You've raised young people who have now had enough independence to leave the home and to find a spouse and to establish a life as a young couple. Pat yourself on the back, give your advice, and then let them do their thing. Because if you don't, it's very similar to individuation stuff we've talked about. If you don't, then you're communicating to the young couple, we don't really think you have what it takes to handle this. And that's disempowering to the young couple that you say that you want to support.
Yeah, there's a fine line between releasing them to do something stupid and releasing them to make mistakes.
Well, but if they're a young couple and they're married, they have every right to do something stupid if they want to. I'm not saying.
They do, but if they come to you as a parent and say something like, well, we want to be a part of this, what would be an example of something that would be really out there?
Some kind of cult they want to join or something.
Yeah, or a pyramid scheme financially where they have to invest $50,000, their entire life savings, and they get the return in 2040. And you're like, that's just not a very wise consideration at the moment. So there's things like where sheer pragmatics would need you to step in and at least give your opinion, even though, again, you don't need to force them or coerce them to decide something. But I would think it'd be erroneous not to say something. And then even how we say it matters. Do we say it with grace and just, hey, this is my take on this, just to make sure? Or are we coming out and going, man, you're going to be an idiot if you do that. That's a different way that's not healthy and not helpful. Mm-hmm. I have one new couple. They're getting married here in a couple months, and she's an only daughter, second marriage. So she's the only one in this new marriage. And he's the oldest of a family. And both mothers are having a hard time. And even in just the wedding dynamics, trying to insert themselves and make decisions on behalf of the couple without asking. It's just been, and the kids are handling it graciously. They're both in master's programs for counseling, and so they're aware of these dynamics, but it just makes it harder, makes it more frustrating. And it is pushing the couple to come forward with, these are our boundaries, these are our positions, we love you, this is how we're going to do this. And it's helpful, really. That's what I'm trying to remind them is, well, at least it's coming to head now, so you can get these topics out and establish some things. Yes, the wedding's a big, big deal and a little heightened intensity and emotions, but it's going to pay dividends down the stretch.
Yeah, we can look at every one of these situations as stressful, maybe undesirable, but also an opportunity to establish yourself as the young couple and saying through your actions, not necessarily even your words, we're going to teach everyone around us now in our families of origin how we are to be treated now, and that we need to put each other first, and we will do so. And there will be times when no matter what the in-laws say on either side, we're going to go our own way and do our own thing. And so they really need to understand in those first couple months, couple years, that they are laying the foundation for this. And if they don't take those opportunities, if they recoil and go, I don't want to deal with this, or that's just my pushy mom, or that's just your pushy dad, and just kind of dismiss it, it's just going to it's going to snowball, because the in-laws will go, oh, well, they didn't push back against that. I guess I can still meddle. And not even if they're intentionally trying to meddle to be unkind, or to communicate that they don't believe that the young people have the what it takes, but it would just happen anyway. They would just realize, okay, the boundary wasn't set, so I'll just continue to say what I have to say, or make decisions that really aren't mine to make, and so forth.
Yeah, it leads to entitlement of the parents or the other influencer to really be a part of your marriage. And right. It often happens in crisis couple work, where the husband or wife who's frustrated will say things this directly, and I think we all can relate to this, that I feel like your mother or your father's in our marriage. Rather than just the support for it and a helpful foundation for it, they're actually in it. It feels like we have to get their decision making, and anytime a partner says that, even casually, I know it's a major issue.
Yeah, well, it's a triangulation with a third party in the marriage that should be a dyad just between the couple. When you think about young men now, and they're establishing, again, I'm the spouse. And of course, we've talked about the spiritual headship of the home, and really the job of providing and protecting their wives. That's a big stretch for a guy in his 20s or even early 30s who, especially in this day and age where women have been told we can be as empowered as possible. That's great. I don't want to even get into that, but we could do an episode at some point why I don't, and many women who resonate with our philosophy don't consider themselves feminists for various reasons. But because we live in a culture that wants to, I don't need a man, and gosh, we vilify men at this point in time. How does that young man move from being partner to provider and protector, especially in an era where women have been taught that they don't need such protection or provision?
Yeah, and again, even though I know that's true culturally, I don't see that in my sessions with the young couples I work with. I know it's there, and I hear it in the college community. But it is talking through very specifically about, and that's why we do the power quotient and all these other things we work on in the premarital, who's in charge of what, who's making decisions based on what, how are we deciding these particular issues, even down to How much time are we spending with each family? How much time are we spending with our friends? What are we doing with gym memberships, Netflix membership? That's why all these details of functionality, though not very sexy or romantic, are hugely important to the very issues you're talking about. So a young man can feel like I'm providing this particular protection, provision, organization, structure, spiritual protection, covering, safety, whatever those things might be. And I do tell young women all the time who are maybe used to not having that to allow their man to be a little overprotective at times, to want to walk closest to the street, to, if there's a couple of guys coming down the sidewalk, they're a little rowdy, to move up in front a little bit. Any of those kind of gentle, chauvinistic, not chauvinistic, gentle, chivalristic activities to allow them to happen, where a lot of women would just kind of, you don't need to do that. I'm okay. Well, yeah, you are okay. But he's doing something that's instinctively in his nature to protect and provide, and we should allow it and to be a part of that. So I think when I'm talking to young men, a lot of times they don't know how to lead, and they're not sure how to influence or assert some masculine energy. And in particular with a strong father-in-law or a bunch of brother-in-laws who maybe are a lot older and well-established. How do you do that? And there's some pragmatism to that. There's also understanding yourself well, speaking honestly, speaking truthful, helping set those particular boundaries, whatever those boundaries might be. There's so many variables there, Karen. It's hard to give like concrete step A, B, and C. But certainly when you're heading into those environments with lots of other family members, if you're going into it stressed out of your mind, anxious, worried, fearful, frustrated, you're already behind then in the communication. That means you and your partner haven't kind of developed the page you're going to be on or the presentation you're going to be on, and doing that pre-communication before the live communication becomes so powerfully difficult.
Yeah. And as you're talking, I'm thinking about these opportunities that we can frame as opportunities, but they're going to be uncomfortable probably. Mm-hmm. And the young people have been used to probably, even more than taking advice, maybe taking monetary support, taking, receiving a lot of help in different ways. And when that happens, it can seem like, oh, we're just helping the young couple.
Yeah.
But anytime that happens, there's an opportunity there, not opportunity, I guess I shouldn't say, but the unintended consequence could be you're emasculating this young man who is just establishing his family with his wife.
Yeah. And if those aren't talked about ahead of time or during or at least after, they'll just keep repeating, and those residual resentments build. And sometimes we're not even aware why we're frustrated or why we don't feel like we want to go hang out with the in-laws, when it could be those kind of variables.
How can a woman help with that?
Well, it depends on what her role is in this scenario. If she's got the systemic that's influencing more than it should, or she's the one who's being underneath the man who's not presenting her well. So there's dynamics on each side, but either way, it's being acknowledging and accepting our partner's perception and not automatically becoming defensive on behalf of our family or friends, which is our normal response. Mm-hmm. To try to receive their perception as least theirs, and not automatically goes, no, that's not true. My mom doesn't get her nose in our business. And he or she could be like, well, certainly does. Mm-hmm. And now we're just going to argue about whether they do, rather than get to the root of the issue. Well, how is this presenting? How is this moving forward? How is this disturbing one of us enough that it's frustrating us and making it not authentic and strong communication and family time? So the young woman, like the young man, needs to bring things up, needs to acknowledge whatever they're feeling, seeing, hearing, or how they're being influenced, and make sure it's communicated. And so receiving each other's perception would be an extremely important foundational element.
Well, and I would say, like, practically speaking, you need to go with any problem you have, you need to go to your spouse first. So if the young girl, I mean, like, I think about if I'd gotten married younger, with dad being such just a presence and so brilliant and so opinionated and 99% of the time, totally right on with those opinions and had researched things to a level that most people didn't. And if I'd been married younger, it might be very easy to go to my dad for advice with whatever situation was at hand and take my dad's advice over my husband's. That would have been dishonoring to my husband, and that would have had the hierarchy out of place in our marriage. But it's easy to do, especially when you have one of these parents who has a lot of energy and charisma and knowledge. It's very hard to make that transition for all involved.
Yeah, so it's not like you discredit or devalue that wisdom, how you approach it, right? You agree together, let's talk to my father, or let's talk to your father. And if one or the other is just saying, no, I just don't feel it's right, I don't have peace about it, then you don't force it and you don't sneak around their back. Mm-hmm. But I have many couples who have done that where they'll reach out to me in the same kind of vein. We've been chewing on this for a year or so, and we decided together to come talk to you and ask some advice about the sexual relationship or a financial issue or an in-law issue, whatever it might be, something intense enough that it was warranting seeking counsel. But I'm always proud of them when I hear that they wrestled through it themselves first. It's not like the wife on the sly texts me and saying, well, don't tell John, but we need to come see you soon. I'm going to send, nope, I'm not meeting you guys until I hear from John too then, because I want to make sure both of you are on the same page, something in that vein.
But better to reach out to you than to one of the parents and then triangulate with the parents.
Yeah, but these are often totally true. But these are often the cases where I am the father figure because there's been an absent father or an absent spiritual leader in their lives. So it's a little different, but you're totally right. Mm-hmm. So the pragmatism there is huge. Agreeing together if you're going to seek counsel, whether it's an in-law or an outside source. Mm-hmm. It's the whole idea of the oneness again, that we are an extension of our partner at all times, in all ways, in all things. That sounds, mystical or just too freaky, but it's true. And therefore, when we're establishing these boundaries in these contexts, so that when a source of possible positivity and generosity presents something like our parents say to us, hey, we're getting a cruise for everyone in Mexico and we're leaving July 7th, we'll be back July 17th. And if I'm the son of that family and I just say, yeah, we're in, without checking with my wife, even though of course it sounds wonderful and it's hopefully a huge blessing, I'm doing a discredit. I'm not valuing the immediacy of the marriage partnership. And maybe there's a huge event on her family, a family reunion during that same time period where great grandma's coming from Costa Rica and hasn't been in the United States in 35 years. And now we've had a situation where now we're having to choose. Mm-hmm. And having to choose is a reality of life. And so I'm not saying that in itself is wrong, but now I've already committed to something without making sure my spouse was 100% on board or double checking the calendar, double checking family processes. So that's a wonderful blessing, of course, some kind of big cruise like that. But at the same time, it's got to be vetted appropriately in the family, in the immediacy of your partnership.
And you hope it's a blessing, but you also hope that there aren't strings attached, because sometimes, and I can imagine also if you have one set of in-laws that have the means to lavish the young couple with these beautiful gifts and experiences, and then the other set of in-laws maybe don't have those means, then there could be some tension there. Oh, we always go with your family because your family takes us to the fancy vacations. Sure. And that is something, and I would honestly just caution young couples to be very, very, very careful whenever there's a monetary reality involved, because whoever pays the bills has the power. And that gift that looked like such a generous, oh, wow, they're just helping us out, may often mean, well, then you're going to do it our way, whatever it is. And
yeah, even if it's not ever stated that way.
Oh, no, it would never be stated.
Well, it could be.
I'm not even saying.
Yeah, but not rarely. Yeah.
Well, and I'm not even saying that the people giving the gift would think that way, but they're just money, power. That is something that's just, it's inherent.
Yeah.
To
automatically.
And again, the young couple, every time that they take something and receive something, it could also, another unintended consequence, could cause the young couple to think, wow, I guess we really can't do it on our own. I guess we really can't save and make these financial purchases or take these trips on our own. And that they're always dependent, which then emasculates everyone and keeps everyone more tied to family of origin than they should be at that point in their development.
Yeah. So another pragmatic, concrete statement then we can make besides the ones we've already made is not saying yes to something until we vetted it with our partner. And then we would, of course, say, pray through it and not receive like this time frame on top of it. Like, hey, we got this opportunity. We want to treat you and your wife to this, but you got to let me know in 2 minutes. Well, Dad, I can't do that. I'm sorry. My wife's at work. We're gonna need to talk through it, pray through it. It's a great opportunity, sure, but we got all these other things going on, and just making sure you don't agree to things or comply to things, even if they're potentially wonderful, without walking it through, talking it through, taking a breath, just like we would encountering some too good to be true job scenario or get rich quick scheme that gets presented to us.
Yeah, and I think that everyone involved, this is something I think very few people probably ever talk about. Everyone involved needs to grieve a little bit because let's say the daughter is so used to going to her mother and father and getting that counsel that she could always count on. And now she has to adjust that dynamic and she has to go to her husband first. And there's a part of her that liked being in that role of, oh, I can just always count on mom and dad to give me the best advice. There's a grieving there. It's certainly a grieving for the middle-aged parents who go, wow, we used to be her primary focus and she would always come to us and now, and as thrilled as everyone is and everyone's happy and they love this marriage and they believe it's the right person for everyone involved, but they're still grieving. And that's something I think people don't understand. And so that has to be, I think, brought to some of those conversations when a couple might say, well, I don't understand, like you should be coming to me now. And the daughter might think, but then my dad will think I don't value his advice as much anymore. And that's grieving and she doesn't value his advice as much anymore.
She doesn't need to, she shouldn't.
Right.
Yeah, it's not that it's bad advice or it's devalued, but it's not the same priority.
Right.
And we talked about that in the traditions episode around Christmas about breaking some traditions because they're not realistic or appropriate for your family anymore is also grieving. It's also sad. You're stealing part of my devotion for the faculty this Thursday at our faculty workshop about the transitions of school calendar. I'm feeling it today. My daughter's feeling it today as a recent graduate. Producer Tim might be feeling it as well. Even though I'm really glad the semester's over, there's some sadness to me today. It's kind of a grieving. I was thinking last night, what do I got to do for my lecture on Tuesday? I'm like, absolutely nothing. I got to switch gears and get ready for the graduate school lectures coming in a week. But it's that whole process of grieving. I'm glad you brought that up. So part of the reason we get defensive at times when our partner brings something up is because we're recognizing the truth in their perception, and then we're seeing change and transition makes us often sad or mad. And so walking through that reality, I think, is helpful. And I do that all the time with young married couples, especially this last couple I was telling you about. We had a good 20-minute talk about this. Recognize both your moms are grieving. The only daughter and the firstborn son. Those are big, big roles that are changing in this family system on both sides. Have compassion for them, have empathy for them, but be directive and be kind and gracious, but don't cater to them because you feel sorry for them. Rather have compassion in how you're setting the boundaries and allow them to then flourish through those, which they will, because 95% of all mothers want a great relationship with their kids. They don't want to be a pain in the butt and get shut out.
Right. And remember that as much as that there is that sadness as this relationship with your parents is adjusting, that by making those adjustments, you are loving your new spouse. You are loving and honoring your new spouse. And as you do that, both of you will have more maturity and strength individually as you navigate this time period of transition, and as you present yourself again to your family and to the community and to whoever else is around, your friends, as a unified couple.
Yeah, the bigger the event of the relational partnership or primary bond, so marriage, birth of children, death of family member, those three as primary, the more change, transition, and grieving that's going to take place, and the more recommunication and establishment of maybe new boundaries, new changes have to be forthright, consistent, and communicated.
Yeah. Well, that's what I wanted to talk about today. So thank
Amen. How about your turn to pray us out then?
Okay, God, we thank you for this time to just take a moment to think about transitions and how they're so exciting, but also there is grief involved always. And sometimes it's hard to even acknowledge that because we want to just be happy and excited and celebratory, but we know that that is the fullness of the human experience. And you didn't give us any emotions that we can't handle. And you didn't give us any emotions that aren't ours to experience and to recognize and to sit with and then to move through. And we just thank you that we can always lean on you and look to your model of marriage that you've presented in Scripture of how much Christ loves the church, and that we can look to that model for inspiration and support, and to know that we are in the midst of these transitions. We can make it, and we can thrive, and we can have joy even in the midst of a bit of sorrow. And thank you for always being with us at all times, and we can come to you before your throne as your children at any time, and we're so thankful for that. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.